Okay, so today on the Plant Cutting Podcast, we have Michael Wilson. And Michael is a herbalist, homesteader, mycologist, and mostly well known at this point for Amanita muscaria, working with that amazing mushroom. So we're going to talk about a lot of things today, but we're going to kind of focus on Amanita, on the Amanitas and muscaria in particular.
So how are you, Michael?
Yeah.
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah,
And
how are you guys doing?
we're good. It's a beautiful day in New York, and you're in Pennsylvania, right?
Yep. Yeah, I live in between Pittsburgh and Erie, so just off in the boonies.
Yeah, we're in the boonies too.
We can relate to the boonies factor. Yep. But we like it.
Yeah.
There's no place I'd rather be.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I love Western Pennsylvania. I was raised there, and it's a beautiful area. This is a similar area too, really. It's kind of part of the Appalachian Plateau, the foothills.
Right.
Yeah.
I love just there's so much like mushroom activity and wild herbs, and I live near a lake, and there's lakes all around me, so there's like just a lot of wildlife and abundance. So
Are you finding any mushrooms like right now these days?
I actually went for a walk yesterday. I was looking for my Ataki, hen of the woods, and I wasn't able to find it. I did find some like old ones, but yeah, I live like an hour and a half north of Pittsburgh, so I'm actually in a different climate zone. So I'll have people like finding things and posting it in Pittsburgh, and then I'm about like 2 weeks delayed.
Oh.
Yeah.
So in like the end of the season, I'm like 2 weeks ahead. So it's already much colder here than just an hour, drive south. So
yeah,
no, I haven't really found much. The last month has been amazing. I've been finding the Amanita muscaria Gisawii, which is well, technically it's still technically Gisawii, but it's undergoing possibly a name change
Okay.
to Amanita chrysoblema. But regardless of what you call it, it's the yellow fly agaric.
Yellow. Okay.
Yeah. It's contains muscimol, ibotenic acid, which are psychoactive compounds, and I pick those. I have a couple other foragers I work with that pick those, and I make extracts out of them. So I make tinctures and oil infusions, and I'll be making some pain relief salves too. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, cool.
nice.
Yeah.
So before we get too far into Amanita muscaria, want to answer our question for first time interviewees. What brought you to the plant path?
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of been like part of my life growing up. Like my mom always had a big garden, and I remember when I was really young, I had a little garden too. And I like to make not just like a bunch of plants, but like something pretty. So like I remember I'd make like little mandala gardens, symmetrical design kind of thing.
Oh.
And I remember like my first garden was like potatoes and like onions and maybe rosemary or lemon balm or something like that. And I just really like, getting in the dirt. And so I started with that. That wasn't really much. It was just playing around. But I was going to school for biology at the community college, and I just was not very happy with like, college and school. And so through a series of events, I just decided to quit going to school. I quit my job, and I actually moved out and started woofing. I woofed at a farm in Indiana, and then I woofed at a farm in Arizona. And that was really where I kind of, cut my teeth in the organic farming world. I stayed out there for a year, and I was also going through yoga teacher training. So I was teaching a little bit of yoga. And then I came back to Pennsylvania after a year of doing that, and I started an even bigger garden at my parents' house. And that's where Harmony Acres Farm began. Yeah, so then I guess with mushrooms and wild herbs, that kind of started in like 2016, and that's really whenever I really got into mushroom foraging. I think as a young kid, I remember going to my parents' woods and like taking sticks and like breaking chicken of the woods. And I remember like the bright orange and like the strange smell it had. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is weird, and
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't
little
see that blaze orange like very often in the wild at that time of the year, you know?
right. Yeah. And so I don't know. I remember like the smell and everything. And I look, back on that moment and I was like, well, I was actually spreading their spores and their mycelium. So I don't have to feel too bad about, destroying this chicken of the woods. But yeah, but then in 2016, I started foraging wild mushrooms, just the edible ones, and then I realized that there's a lot of medicinal ones, and I started making double extractions out of them. And that's like, I felt a lot of passion around that. And I realized that, it's kind of like renegade medicine. Like I can just go in the woods and find these wild mushrooms and start making medicine and giving those to people. So that's really like kind of where it began.
Hmm.
Awesome. Yeah.
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 So what brought you to work with Amanita muscaria
Well, that
or the
was,
other Amanitas too?
yeah. So again, whenever I was a kid, I actually saw one in my parents' property. It was under the eastern white pine. And I remember like sitting with it and just looking at it and thinking, oh, this is that like poisonous and psychedelic one. Like I remember having a lot of respect and fear, but also curiosity around it. So um, I started working with Amanita muscaria back in the very beginning of 2020, and I had a winter solstice party in 2019, and I remember somebody bringing up microdosing Amanita muscaria, and I thought, that's crazy. Like that's that poisonous mushroom. It's psychedelic. Like why would you do that? And then two other people brought it up to me, and it was also a time in my life where I was abusing cannabis pretty heavily, and I realized that I needed to stop. It was causing anxiety, paranoia, some effects that people may have, but they're kind of either unwilling to admit. I think even, with a lot of different herbs, we like to think of things as like panaceas, but I think everything is, I don't think everything is for everyone. And I think that
Yeah. Right.
in moderation, a lot of things can be good. So I actually quit smoking cannabis, and then Amanita kind of came into my life through a series of people introducing me to, them taking it in even large amounts, and they were perfectly fine. And not just fine, but actually having prolonged periods of like a lack of anxiety. So I started to look into the mechanisms, and
Mhm.
yeah.
So who is Amanita muscaria?
Yeah, like the spirit of it.
The being,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, so it's kind of this like enigmatic occult mushroom. Like occult things are hidden in plain sight, right? And it's the mushroom emoji, it's the Super Mario Brothers mushroom, it's Alice in Wonderland. So it's this like, and like a lot of people have weird experiences with it. They're either say like it didn't do anything, or they had a negative experience, or what I'm finding more and more is that in the right way, in the right dosages, people have like profound experiences. Yeah, so I think it's kind of like the essence of it to me is, it is the time mushroom.
the time
Right.
mushroom.
Yeah. Have you guys ever heard of like people having experiences with Amanita and like
Well, yeah. I mean, I have a little story about Amanita muscaria. Back in 2011 during Occupy, I did Occupy Pittsburgh, and I was going through a lot of changes at that time. And there are these two big white pine trees at my mom's place, and um, right at that time, that in October, that Occupy was happening, we had a huge flush, the biggest flush of Amanita muscaria I've ever seen. It's the yellow ones, um, which are the ones that grow around here. And so I decided to take some, and I looked up some directions on like Arrowwood or yeah, one of those sites, but I don't think I did it quite right. I didn't dry them correctly. I didn't process them correctly. I just made a tea out of them, made a tea, and then I just drank that, and it was kind of disgusting. Honestly, made me very, very nauseated. It was interesting though, but I wouldn't call it transcendental or anything. But then we had a bunch of these mushrooms, and they started. We were trying to dry them on the wood stove, but we didn't. At that point, I was still learning a lot about how to do things, and I didn't know how to. I didn't cut them correctly and dry them in the right way. They got filled with maggots.
Oh yeah.
So we took them to the chickens. We gave them to the chickens, and then the chickens started going a little bit nuts. We had this one rooster. He ate. They all ate all the maggots, because it's chicken food. But I guess the chemicals must have gone through the maggots. So this one rooster was just like going up to the wall and going like this. Just knocking his head. I mean, he seemed like he was having a decent time. He wasn't like he was definitely affected by them though.
That's hilarious. Oh my god.
Through the maggots.
He was probably experiencing like a looping, yeah,
time loop.
Yeah, time loop. Yeah. So that's something that can happen, and it seems like a pretty common experience. Have you guys ever heard of Paul Stamets' experience with the panther caps?
Not with panther caps. No.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's like a Joe Rogan interview, and
okay.
He ate these panther caps on pizza with his friend, and he decided to go. They were like, I think at a park or something, and they decided to go watch the Winnebago people. All the people that have Winnebagos, and he brought his camera, and he started feeling the effects, and he ended up like dropping his camera repetitively and then picking it back up. And so like
wow.
Yeah, if it's taken without a trip sitter or like under an experienced person, then you can have some pretty negative side effects. And I think that's why the main focus of my work is in the microdose. And like, I want to coin this term, like the magic is in the microdose. Because I think with a lot of different psychedelics, like people can have very positive transformation with those like, high dose breakthrough.
Yeah, heroic doses. Yeah.
Yeah. And I liken the microdose to like, meditation. Because it's almost like the integration is built in with it. You don't have this like massive experience of ego death, and you have to like come back to your subjective viewpoint. It's like just a little bit of a conscious shift daily, and that's why I really subscribe to like the microdose for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like there's a theory about the Vikings. The Vikings used to make a mushroom brew, and they'd go off to war, and that's where the term berserkers came from. And what people believe is that they were taking Amanita muscaria.
Yeah. So it's one of Odin's mushrooms.
Yeah. Right. So your rooster was probably in berserker mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that like the beauty of Amanita in that microdose form is that instead of like going to this like deep, time loop where your mind is overwhelmed and you kind of have to surrender to the experience. Amanita in microdoses, it can be used to, it basically, for me, in my experience and what I've heard from others, is that it allows you to realize that, time is an illusion. Like everything is happening right now, but we are experiencing this human life form where, we're under the illusion of like time and space. And I think what Amanita does is that it shows you that illusion in a way where, let's say you had some childhood like core wounds, like core trauma, and Amanita can help you revisit those traumas without the visceral reaction of like the fight or flight response in the body. Because I think, when you think about trauma, your mind doesn't really know the difference between thinking about something or watching something or actually experiencing something. And so your mind can get in these time loops where, say your dad abused you, and then like, somebody later in life raises their hand and they may not have even gone to hit you, but you were brought back to that visceral experience, like an abused dog. And so with Amanita, the way that it interacts, specifically muscimol, which is the main compound that people are seeking, is that it's a GABA agonist and it suppresses the fight or flight response in the body. So you could have the intention to go in and heal core trauma and then have that memory come up, and you don't have that visceral reaction of clenching up or tensing up or having that like, cortisol dump in your body. And I think whenever that happens, you can actually like heal and move on from those traumas. So it's pretty profound.
And that's with microdosing.
Yeah, that's with microdosing. I think, with microdosing, it takes a little longer than like a very well organized macro dose could also offer that in a quicker way. But again, with those macro doses, it's like a give and take. Like the more intense your experience is, the more time you need to integrate. So I think with the microdose, you can kind of just like integrate as you go.
Right. And again, we're not medical professionals or licensed psychological professionals.
Right.
So this is not, you shouldn't be, taking these as without consulting your medical professionals. We're not diagnosing or treating anything. But so these have a potential for working with Amanita can potentially help with anxiety and working through these deep-seated traumas and trauma responses, is what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. It seems to be a common theme in people's experiences. And also I want to just piggyback on what you said about the disclaimer. And it's the weird world that I operate in, because my business is based around medicinal mushrooms. That's where I began. But then whenever I started working with Amanita, it kind of like took off more.
Yeah.
But according to the FDA, Amanita muscaria is a poisonous mushroom. Mm-hmm. And that's because of the high concentration of ibotenic acid in its raw state. And so I have to sell these tinctures as symbolic or topical use only. So it's a weird world to navigate, because it's not a scheduled substance either. So you could have 10 pounds of Amanita and get pulled over and they can't do anything because it's not even classified as a drug.
Well, they could lock you up until they tested it. Probably. For sure. They can do whatever they want to, but
right. And then they confiscate your mushrooms, as evidence. But
and then they get full of maggots and
right. Now, actually, there was a big mail order company back in like the 70s or 80s, and they sold, I think their mail order catalog was called Poisonous Non-Consumables. And with Mark Niemöller was like the owner of it. And they actually got shut down by the FBI. Nothing they were selling was illegal. They, gave pretty hefty disclaimers, but their disclaimer said, these mushrooms are not intended to be consumed. If you, do not put them in your eyes, ears, mouth, nose, or anus. And the final ruling with that was basically like, you're circumnavigating the law, you're making a joke of it. Obviously, we know what you're doing. So there has been pushback against this mushroom, but it's literally been used for like thousands of years. Like there's well documented, evidence that this is used in indigenous communities in Lapland near the North Pole. This is where the whole Santa Claus myth is coming from, which I'd happily get into that. But
can you tell us about the Santa Claus myth?
Yeah. So I've done a lot of research on this, and it's not exactly clear, but I could give you kind of paint a picture for you. So the Sami people are an indigenous community of people that were caribou herders or reindeer herders. And there's this idea that like there was a shaman that would come around like the winter solstice time. And there's like a couple different ways you can look at this, where maybe he, the houses were all snowed in, and so he had to like climb through the chimney, which I don't buy it, because I don't think a human being could fit in a chimney. But there's some, like you can draw an analogy from this, where you have these red and white little gifts right under pine trees, conifers, and a man would come around with a big sack of presents and give them to everyone. And the whole idea was that the shaman would come into your house and either take the mushrooms or give you the mushrooms and give you gifts or insight from the spirit world. So he's a cloaked red and white man. Amanita's colors are red and white. Also you can hang Amanitas from the Christmas trees or the pine trees, and this is a way to dehydrate them and also help spread the spores. So
nice. Yeah. So
wow. Yeah.
Oh, one more thing too.
Yeah.
The flying reindeer thing. Okay, so
yeah,
caribou, reindeer, they like to eat Amanitas. And so there's this process that happens whenever when you process Amanitas correctly, you are dehydrating them, or you're taking them fresh and you're boiling them. But you have to, either way you do it, dehydrated or raw, you have to do a full decarboxylation from ibotenic acid to muscimol. It was outlined in the Austin patent, which is pretty well tested study. Is you boil the mushrooms at a pH of 3 for 3 hours at 100 degrees Celsius. Now this is achieving a full decarb. Now another way to do it is to have a caribou or a reindeer eat them, and then you drink their urine. And
right.
So I actually saw a picture, like a really old picture, where they actually had a can strapped around a reindeer, and the can was collecting the reindeer urine, because they're not as affected by the ibotenic acid, and their body would naturally decarboxylate the ibotenic acid into muscimol. So this is where the whole flying reindeer concept comes from. And this Siberian shaman in the North Pole giving people red and white gifts.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I've also heard that like maybe the shamans would eat it, and then the people would drink their piss or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah, it's like I've heard people even saying like the reindeer drink the human piss. Whatever it is, there's a lot of piss drinking. And
I see.
it's
Yeah.
a interesting process, but it's just the
Works,
history of it.
works.
Yeah, if it works.
Right.
So maybe we could talk a little bit now about the different subspecies of Amanita muscaria, because I know that those red and white ones up in Lapland are going to be different than the ones in Western Pennsylvania or New York. The ones that I found were yellow with white little dots on it. So how many subspecies are there of Amanita muscaria, and are all of them used in the same way, or are there differences between them?
Yeah, so I actually don't know the exact number of how many different subspecies there are. And I think that just taxonomically, we're kind of trying to figure out what's what still. With taxonomy, we kind of always are.
Yeah, they're always changing the names of things.
I know it's ridiculous. Being in like a chat or a forum where people are arguing over taxonomical updates is just like, but so you could call, the Amanita in general has mushrooms that are deadly, like the destroying angels or the death caps. And there's at least 6 different types of destroying angel. I wasn't aware of this. One of the main ones people know about is Amanita phalloides. And that one will basically, you will die within 12 days or something like that. Typically, most people don't survive it. There are some people who do. And if you catch it early enough, you can, go to the hospital before your liver is melted. So Amanita has, mushrooms that will kill you, mushrooms that you can eat that are, choice edibles, and also what, is considered a muscaroid, which is, a muscimole containing Amanita. Some of the ones that are edible that I've only actually tried the Amanita amarorubescens complex, and that's known as the blusher Amanita. There's like at least 6 different types of what would be considered amarorubescens. There's also the Amanita jacksonii, which is the Caesar's mushroom.
Yeah, that's the one I've tried, and I find that fantastic. It might be one. I mean, every time I find a good mushroom, that's my favorite mushroom. Like,
It's good,
but it's really good, and you can eat it basically raw. It's one of the few mushrooms you can eat raw. What I like to do is make a ceviche with it, like add some garlic and vinegar and oil and salt,
lemon
pepper,
juice or lime juice.
and let that sit for like a day, and then it's amazing. And that does cook it a little bit,
Right.
processes it. But yeah, the Caesar's amanitas are fantastic.
Yeah, I didn't know you could eat those raw. I've never actually tried one before, but yeah, I tried the amarorubescens. They were okay. They were not my favorite. But as far as like the muscaroids go, out in the northern eastern North America, we have the Amanita muscaria gisawii. And then in the southeast of North America, we have Amanita persicina. That's a muscimole containing Amanita. I think it's known as like the southern peach Amanita. It's like a really pretty peach color. And then the Midwest doesn't have a whole lot. Like the gisawii will kind of drift out towards like Indiana, I think maybe even Idaho. And then whenever you get out west, like, Colorado, and even down into Mexico, you have Amanita muscaria flavavolta, I think. And all the way up into, Canada and up into Alaska. The Amanitas grow pretty prolifically there. And I believe, I know my taxonomy friends are going to kill me for this. I think it's Amanita muscaria that grows in the West Coast, which is the same variety of Amanita in Europe. I might be wrong on that, but if you looked at them, you wouldn't really be able to tell much of a difference. It's, red cap with the white warts. Yeah, and then also we have the panther caps.
Right. Yeah. So I always thought those were just poisonous.
Right. So yeah, the panther. So panther cap is a good common name for a lot of different types of mushrooms.
Okay.
Pantherina only grows in Europe, whereas we have pantheroids or pantherinoides, and those would be like in I've actually found some this year. We have Amanita velatipes and Amanita multisquamosa, and then out west we have pantherinoides, which are probably what Paul Stamets was tripping on when he ate that pizza. And those are extremely potent. Pantherina in general is way more potent in muscimol than Amanita muscaria. It also has less ibotenic acid, which is cool. So less of the conversion needs done.
So it's maybe even better than muscaria for this process, for this taking.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's I think that a lot of people say pantherina are reliably more potent. So you could, take one and probably what a gram is going to do or whatever. But with muscaria, it's kind of all over the place. You'll have mushrooms growing side by side that could be 10 times weaker or stronger than the other one. Yeah. So
that's strange.
Yeah. So you'll have a lot of people, they'll say like, I took, 5 grams, 10 grams, 15 grams, nothing happened. And then you'll have somebody else who's like, I took 10 grams and I was, living in a fractal for, 5 hours and didn't have a pleasant experience. So
yeah.
Oh, geez.
And so you don't really know like what you're getting unless you are testing it or
Right. So I think the best way to start working with Amanita is to pick or buy a large amount and you grind it all up, and then you have this, equalized dose.
Yeah. Okay.
And you could make a tea out of that and freeze it into portions. And that way, you can titrate up, you can take a small amount, and then exactly what that batch is like. So
can we talk a little bit more about medicine making and like how you go about microdosing if you wanted to microdose Amanita? Like what do you recommend doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like the easiest low tech solution for people is weighing out a portion of Amanitas, like I said, grinding it up and making a tea. So to just get the active compounds out, all you need to do is boil it for 20 minutes, and then strain the mushrooms. If you want to do a full decarb, you need to add citric acid, lower the pH down to 3, or you can even just do straight lemon juice, which sounds disgusting to me. I've never done it, but something to get the pH down to 3, and then you boil it for 3 hours and strain the mushrooms. And it's really up to personal preference. I think some people actually like a little bit of ibotenic acid. I actually did an experiment where I just ate a raw mushroom just to see what would happen. And it was a very high dose of ibotenic acid. It was not the most pleasant experience, but I could see, a smaller amount of that being quite uplifting and nice. It can be, very stimulating to the nervous system. Like if you're prone to, seizures or like had a weak constitution, then I would not recommend it, but most people can handle a little bit. So, it's really, I think if somebody was starting out, it'd be safer to just do a full decarboxylation. So again, you'd boil the mushrooms at 100 degrees Celsius at a pH of 3 for 3 hours, strain the mushrooms, and then you'd have to figure out, how much volume you have, 2 grams. So you do your math like that. And then you can freeze it in portions, like take the tea and put it in ice cube trays. I have these little silicone mats that all measure out 1 milliliter perfectly. So I like to use these tiny little guys. And then, I tell people like you could start with a small amount, and that's really variable. Everybody has a different. Same thing with psilocybin. Everybody's like, a microdose is this, a microdose is that, and it's really like, I think smaller is better. I think that with all plants and all mushrooms, developing like a really slow build up relationship is really ideal, because
Yeah.
you guys are herbalists, whenever you start working with a plant, there's like little subtleties that you may not notice if you're taking other things or if you're taking a large amount.
And people react differently. I mean, just as the Amanita muscaria might be different between mushroom to mushroom, people are also very different in how they metabolize or how they react.
Yeah.
What happens in them. So it's good to start small with everything. It's good to start small.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really lends to like this need we have in our culture and society to like slow down.
Yeah.
Everything's just so fast paced. I want this effect. I want it now. It's I want to feel it, and it's really just like, I think it's a good way to kind of check our egos and like get us to really like slow down and breathe, pay attention to what's happening with our body and with our, the seasons and everything. So yeah, and like again, you don't know how you're going to respond to something. So yeah, it's good to start slow.
Yeah. So we did talk a little bit about like what its uses are, and you're saying that it's good for working with trauma and trauma response and with anxiety. So what other reasons do people use this? Like pain relief? Like I've heard people using it instead of like benzos or so on. Why would somebody want to be using this medicine?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's like anxiety seems to be like the number one thing that's going on in this country, again, with that fast-paced culture. We're just overstimulated, and Amanita can help you just like slow down and tune in. I think it helps me get into like a flow state, helps me feel more creative, more open, less inhibited. Some people will like, there was the I think it was Sami or maybe the Kerouac tribal people, where they were about to go sing and they were kind of nervous, and then they took Amanita and they were able to sing like really well, and like you could say Amanita removes fear or it gives you courage. So it, like, I've noticed that like I come out of my shell a little more, and it's not like this like I'm drinking coffee and I'm like really agitated and like animated. It's like
Yeah.
what I
Jittery
mean?
and yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's a GABA agonist. Other things that are GABA agonists are alcohol, benzodiazepine, as you mentioned, and I believe chamomile and lavender. And so it's, if anybody has tried any of those things, you can see what kind of genre of psychoactive it is. And so I think it also helps people that have depression. I've heard of and also personally experienced the beneficial effects whenever you have Lyme disease. I have
Wow.
Lyme disease. I've been bitten by like dozens of ticks. I've been tested. I have it, and it really sucks. For anybody who lives in this area that has Lyme disease, it's horrible. And if I didn't live such a healthy lifestyle, I'd probably be crippled by it. But it kind of helps alleviate that lethargy, the inflammation. So Amanita, when taken orally, can actually create systemic anti-inflammatory benefits, but also the tincture or oil infusion can be applied topically to a specific pain area. And it seems to help people that have muscle pain, muscle inflammation, also nerve pain, like sciatic issues. People will apply it directly to their spine. It's kind of like almost as versatile as cannabis. I mean, you can actually smoke Amanita mushrooms. which is pretty interesting. I've done it. It's not really the best use of the medicine. I think it's kind of wasteful. You can vaporize it, and you can eat it. You can make a tea out of it. You can make a tincture. You can make an oil infusion. It's a very versatile mushroom. Whereas psilocybin, you can't smoke psilocybin. It'll destroy the compounds. And so, another thing that's interesting is that muscimol has similar effects to the body as Chantix, which is that the drug that people take to quit smoking. And so it can help with, addictions. Oh, you guys are muted.
Oh, when you make tinctures of it, are you doing like a double extraction process where you're boiling some of the Amanita or like making a tea out of the Amanita and combining it with alcohol extract? Or is the alcohol just like a preserving agent for the tea? Like
does the alcohol like extract the
certain
muscimol
constituents? Or yeah.
So ethanol is a poor extractor of muscimol. So it's like one of the only very few mushrooms or herbs that I'll work with where I just do a single water extract. Now, some people might do an alcohol extract to get other compounds in the mushroom. But the main one that I'm looking for is muscimol, and that's very soluble in water. It's also very soluble in methanol. I don't use methanol, so for Amanita, I just do a water extract, and then I add the alcohol for shelf stability.
I see.
Okay, cool.
And did we cut you off before you were saying that it helps you stop smoking nicotine?
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, if you really want to, I smoke tobacco. I grow my own tobacco, and I love smoking organic, good tobacco. I don't really have an issue with it. I just some days I won't even smoke, but I find that the days when I take Amanita, I don't have those like little cravings as much. It's just like, well, if I want to have a cigarette or not, it can go either way. And same thing with psilocybin too. There have been studies on single experiences with psilocybin were more effective than a lot of the smoking cessation drugs like years later, which is just incredible from one experience. So
that's really awesome. Yeah. I think a lot of people could benefit from a little help with like quitting smoking if that's what they want to do. So that's really cool to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you brought up psilocybin. So I also wanted to know, like, what are the differences between psilocybin and Amanita muscaria as far as efficacy or the effects that they have on your body?
Yeah. So psilocybin is affecting the serotonin pathways. It's serotonergic. And that's what a lot of classic psychedelics are affecting, is the serotonin pathway. Amanita muscaria is GABAergic. It's affecting the GABA pathways. So it's like two completely different areas of the brain. And I think that psilocybin microdosing is also amazing. And I've actually been doing some research on, I'm really into like nootropics and, supplements or herbs that can help, stimulate cognition, memory recall. And psilocybin is actually increases neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is your ability to adapt and overcome to new changes or challenges. And it's also slightly neurogenerative. So people can use psilocybin to kind of train new habits. Just mentioning Paul Stamets again, his first major psilocybin experience was him walking through the woods, and then he decided to climb a tree, and he ate way too much. He was like a young kid, and as he climbed this tree, it was storming, and he realized that basically he could possibly die in this tree. And he's like, well, if I die, like, what's the one thing, or I forget how it went, but basically he made this ultimatum that if he was going to come down from that tree and live, that the one thing he would want to take away is to quit stuttering, because he had this really bad stutter. And he just kept saying to himself over and over again, stop stuttering now, stop stuttering now. And from that one psilocybin experience, he quit stuttering. Like he'll have it every once in a while, but
Wow, yeah.
yeah.
Amazing.
So I think with Amanita muscaria, it's neuroprotective, which
Okay.
is pretty interesting. So another thing that's neuroprotective is cacao. And so the neuroprotection is you have your neurons and you have your axon, which is the connection between the neurons, and that axon is protected by a myelin sheath. And so muscimol will actually protect that myelin sheath from being destroyed. So what one thing I also encourage people to look into is lion's mane mushroom, which is
Yes.
pretty, yeah, you like
Love lion's mane.
Yeah.
Can't get enough.
Yeah. So yeah, lion's mane is very neurogenerative. So whenever you look at all three of these mushrooms together, you have this trifecta where the lion's mane creates neurogenesis. So you're creating new neurons, you're repairing permanent nerve damage. But we live in a stressful environment full of oxidation. So oxidative stress can actually destroy these neurons that you have been building. And so whenever you have lion's mane for neurogenesis, you have psilocybin for neuroplasticity, to train and write new pathways in your brain, and then you have Amanita muscaria to protect everything and keep that progress protected. I think you have like a really powerful trifecta. So,
Definitely. Yeah.
So yeah.
I was just thinking about lion's mane crab cakes for a second, because we made some really delicious crab cakes. There's no crab in it, but I use the lion's mane with onions and fry it up and make a little like dip for it, and it's just heavenly.
Oh, that's awesome.
Gotta recommend that.
I've never tried lion's mane crab cakes. I'm trying to think. I did trying to think what it was. I breaded and fried fiddleheads. That's what it was.
Oh, yum. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, my wife and I made what we call fiddle cakes. So you do the boil on the fiddle heads and then strain it off, and then bread them and egg them and bread them again. Nice. And then you form them into like a patty and fry it, and you get a fiddle cake. So
nice.
That
yeah,
sounds
that sounds
so
great.
good.
Love fiddlehead.
Yeah. So you make tinctures and sell them. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your business and where people can find the tinctures if they want to get some?
Yeah, sure. So my website, the main one I'm working with right now is allthingsamanita.com. And that's my business name, is All Things Amanita. And I also have another website. It's Harmony Acres Farms with an S.org. And the Amanita website is where I have the Amanita products plus the Harmony Acres tinctures. And the reason I had to create this division is because there's all this stigma around Amanita. I've been through the ringer as far as which payment processors and websites I can use.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I started on Etsy of all places. And I was selling Amanita. If you typed in the word Amanita or muscaria, I was the first top left thing that would pop up. And it was, saying top seller. And so I was the top seller for 2 months. And one day they just shut me down. They said, it's not allowed on our website. So I had to create a new website. And I was using PayPal as a payment processor, and then PayPal shut me down. And so then I had to go through the route of basically the merchant payment processors that deal with gambling, gun sales, tobacco, pornography, like just like the gutters of society. I had to get lumped into that. So I have my own website now, allthingsamanita.com, and that's where I can sell everything and tell everyone what it is. And
Awesome. Yeah, that's great that you're, providing the mushrooms for people to try, in case they don't want to go through the process of making it themselves, if they're afraid they're not going to do it right or something. It's like they
Or-
can just try it from you, and
Yeah.
you've done it,
Or I mean, because there are like deadly poisonous
Yeah.
amanitas, like
Mhm.
I can see why you wouldn't want to necessarily just go around picking amanitas
Yeah.
if you don't know them well,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to go with a guide, or have like 3 really reputable sources confirm something first, like
Yeah.
with confidence. Like you need to
Yes.
really,
Right.
nothing is worth eating, something poisonous. It's just, if you have to bring it home and you can't identify it, just throw it back in the woods. Like it's not that big of a deal. Mushrooms are like the fruit of an apple tree. If
Yeah.
you pick an apple, it's not going to kill the tree.
Mhm.
You're just picking the fruit of it. So there's no, mushrooms in general, like, and herbs, but it's a very slow, very slow and nuanced kind of art and craft. And
Yeah.
that's what I love about it, because it teaches me to slow down.
Yeah.
And you can
So
always
true.
keep learning. There's always more to learn.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, it's endless.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
yeah. But
So
yeah.
speaking of some of the misinformation and stigma around Amanita muscaria, like what have you run it up against as far as misinformation?
I think one of the main things is just that this is only a poisonous mushroom. It has no beneficial properties. This mushroom has been used for centuries to help people, and it's just that in most cases that our herbal information has been wiped away from the indigenous people of this earth that have been you know killed and moved out of their homes. I think that we're seeing right now a revival in plants and mushrooms in general, and I'm really really hopeful because we have the help of the internet to spread that information. So yeah, the just the idea that this is a poisonous mushroom, there's nothing beneficial, that is the main one. Another one is preparation methods. Some people make claims about dehydrating does this much decarboxylation, and then boiling, and the tried and true method that has been studied through science is the Austin patent, where you boil the mushrooms fresh or dried. If you do this properly, you'll have very little ibotenic acid. Boil the mushrooms at a pH of 3 and do it for 3 hours at 100 degrees Celsius. That is like the safest way to prepare them. And another thing is that like, just people talk about like only like you got to take off the warts of the mushroom, or
Okay.
you got to like skin the top of it or something like that. And it's like, it's really just take the mushroom as it is. Another thing too is that some people say the stems of the mushroom don't have anything beneficial in them. The stems have less of the active compounds, but they also have other beneficial compounds. They can help you process different parts of the mushroom. So I look at things like from a holistic point of view, where it's like, you have the whole mushroom, like there's obviously some benefit in there too, in the stems. So I'd say those are the main ones. I mean, it's there's a lot of misinformation, but if I can do a plug for a group that I'm a part of on.
Oh yeah.
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 So there's a lot of different information sources out there for Amanita, but in my research, the best online research or forum you can go to, if you're on Facebook, if you go to Amanita Muscaria Science and Magic, that is one of the best groups. We have like over 35,000 members in there. We have experts in there like Kevin Feeney, who wrote the Fly Agaric Compendium. If people want to learn more, if they like to read books, I recommend the Fly Agaric Compendium. There's also a microdosing Amanita book that just came out. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard good things about that. And and if you're not on Facebook, you could go on Reddit, and it's just r/Amanita Muscaria. Those are really like the best resources, because I think whenever if you just go, like, even myself, like I'm one person, I'm gonna get some information wrong, and I have done it and I feel terrible about it. Then I'll tell everybody, like, that I told that misinfo too, and I'm like, hey, it's actually this way, I'm sorry. I'm one person. So there's other people that are just one person, and I think that it's best to be in a group discussion, because you can have like 10 or 20 or 30,000 different people chiming in, and you get more of there's less gatekeeping that way. So yeah, definitely check out if you're on Facebook, the Science and Magic page is definitely the best.
That's great to know. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, yeah, thank you for being on the show, Michael. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap things up?
Just continue being curious.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, that's all.
Sweet.
Well, yeah, thanks again. And
yeah, we'll post your websites in the show notes, and be well. Thank you again, Michael.
All right, you guys too. Thanks for having me on.
For
Have
sure.
a blessed day.
You too. Bye.